Open your books to 1534, which is where the study of Shakespeare begins. There's a little bit of background information, and I'm going to add to it quite a bit. You got two different paintings of Shakespeare there on 1535. The top one from the first folio, which was published in 1623. We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. So let's begin with Shakespeare. He's born probably on April 23rd, 1564. We say probably because we don't have an actual birth certificate that lists the exact date. We do know, however, he was baptized, I believe it was on the 26th or 27th, and that is usually baptisms occurred 3 or 4 days after birth. So the general consensus is that he was born on April 23rd. He then dies on April 23rd, 1616. Okay? 52 years old. I'm older than Shakespeare was when he died. Okay? But he did an awful lot more in his 52 years. When you think about it, he writes 37 full-length plays, 4 major long poems, and 154 sonnets. Sonnets are 14-line poems. Okay? But you can't really say he does that in his 52 years because he's not writing when he's 10 years old. All of this probably occurs in the years roughly 1590 to about 1613. So 23 years. Just leave the poetry out. 37 plays, 23 years. That's about 1.5 plays per year. Shakespeare plays. Not like Edith Glaspell's Trifles that's in your book, you know, like a 5-page, 1-act, 5-act major, roughly 3-hour production plays. 1.5 of those a year. And he's also doing that stuff. And he's also helping run the Globe Theater. And he's acting in it. Okay? It is a mind-blowing, tremendous output. Back to his birth dates and death dates. Kind of interesting that he's probably born, but that he definitely dies on this day. Because April 23rd is St. George's Day. You've heard the story of St. George and the Dragon? Okay. St. George is the patron saint of England. And here we have the patron writer of England born on that patronal feast day. A lot of people say, you know, it's just weird how things like this happen because they don't happen in any other country. This is the only country, every country essentially, every quote-unquote Christian country, essentially has its own patron saint. The United States doesn't because we have a thoroughly kind of secular religion based upon the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. You know, if we have our church fathers, they're Washington, Jefferson, Adams, those guys, okay? But Shakespeare is born on this day and he dies on this day, okay? 1564, in 1582, no, take it back. Yes, in 1582, he marries Anne Hathaway, the original, not the current one. Okay. When he marries her, she's apparently about 6 months pregnant. Okay, because shortly thereafter, either 6 months or 3 months, shortly thereafter, she delivers their first child, 1582, Susanna. Okay. 1585, they have twins, Hamnet and Judith. And then from the rest of 1585 to about 1592, Shakespeare drops off the map. We have no idea where he is or what he's doing. Literally. There is no record of him whatsoever anywhere from 1585 to 1592. Okay? These years are generally called the lost years because the information in them is lost to us. We know that by late 1592, he's in London. I mean, that's a fact. Okay? And we know that because other writers are referring to him, and they're jealous. They're envious. Okay? He's probably begun writing some of the plays, as I said, around 1590. Okay? By the mid-1590s, I mean, late 1592, he's already well known. Early 1592, say March 1592, we have nothing, absolutely nothing. And then by December 1592, people are referring to him. Okay? By the mid-1590s, 94, 95, 96, he's famous. People are referring, for example, in the late mid-1590s, people are referring to his sugared sonnets, plural. He hasn't published any sonnets as of that time. Okay? So what that means is Shakespeare's sonnets, at least some of them, are circulating in handwritten copies. People are reading them. Okay? Interestingly enough, none of these handwritten copies survive, which is just really weird. Because you would think with somebody like Shakespeare, who's already so well known, people would be copying his poems if they were available and keeping them. Okay? Here's how weird that is. You know, Shakespeare is obviously quite famous. Another famous poet, slightly later than Shakespeare, born 6 years later, born 6 years later than Shakespeare, is a guy named John Donne, okay, who becomes very, very famous. He's alive same time as Shakespeare. He dies about 15, 16 years after Shakespeare. But Donne, as an example, we have over 5,000 handwritten copies of his poems. We have one in Donne's own handwriting. Okay? All the others are from people copying his poems. He only wrote about 200 poems in his lifetime. But he's really popular. People are just copying them, sending their copy off. Others are copying them, etc. So Donne, over 5,000 copies. Shakespeare, nowhere close to that. Fewer than 100, I believe. Okay? So it's kind of weird if somebody is referring to Shakespeare's sugared sonnets and we don't see them surviving anywhere. Okay? This is going to be evidence for what a later group of people are going to call, I can't think how to put this. Evidence for later people to question whether Shakespeare really wrote the plays. It's called the authorship question. Because in the 18th century and on up to today, people started to say, This rube, this hick from Stratford-on-Avon could not have written these plays. Idea is, only a university-educated man could have written these plays. Notice the elitism there, the snobbery there. In fact, the first proponents of this said not just any university-educated somebody, had to be the Earl of Oxford. Okay, the only people who originally suggested the Earl of Oxford, guess what? Were related to the Earl of Oxford. They were the descendants of the Earl of Oxford. Okay? And a couple of other names, Francis Bacon, the descendants of Francis Bacon said this. So essentially, not entirely, but for some people who question whether or not Shakespeare really wrote the poems and plays, they've got a vested interest in it. They want to be able to say, well, I'm descended from the real person who wrote the plays. Okay? Here's the big problem with that Shakespeare authorship question. There's no evidence to support it. There's no evidence to support that anybody other than William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon wrote the works that are attributed to him. Because from 1592, we have works being attributed to him. And we know he's in London for the next 20 years. He's involved in lawsuits. Okay? He's called as a witness. We know where he lived. The whole 9 yards. We know he was a member of an acting company. We know that that acting company at one point in time had one name, and later on it takes on another name because the king comes to support it. Okay? We know that he and his players, fellow actors, one night in 1599 or 1 week in 1599, took apart the theater that they were putting on their plays in and rebuilt it in another location. Okay, the Globe Theater. In 1599, it wasn't called the Globe. It had a very original title, one you'll have a hard time remembering. Before 1599, it was simply called the Theater. It was built by one of Shakespeare's colleagues' father in the late 1570s. He built it on a plot of land that was leased. And in 1599, the owner of the lot of land called in the lease. That is, the lease was due. You either buy it, the land, or it's mine again. Okay? The land was his, but the building on it wasn't. So what Shakespeare's company does is they take apart the building and move it. They take it apart from where it was originally constructed in Shoreditch, London, and they move south of the River Thames into the area called Southwark, and they reconstruct it there, and it gets the new name, the Globe. Okay? They build it south of the River Thames because then it's outside the jurisdiction of the Mayor of London, which means he can't close it down. So he can close down everything within the actual jurisdiction of London. So south of the River Thames in Southwark is where you had an influx of playhouses. We know of at least 3 that were there. You have bear baiting pits, like think dog fights or cockfights today. These are with bears and dogs. Okay, it's where all the brothels were, all the whorehouses, because if the prostitutes operated in London, the city limits, the whorehouses could be shut down by the mayor. Outside the city of London, the mayor can't touch them. Okay? So that's just some background. As I said, Shakespeare dies in 1616. The first folio, and I should have brought this, the first folio is the first edition of the complete plays of Shakespeare. It's actually not quite complete. If I remember right, it's missing something like 5 or 10 plays. Okay? But it's the first complete edition of Shakespeare's plays. And the book's about this tall, by about this wide, by about this thick. Okay? And it's put together by his colleagues from the Globe. They all go in on it. They get a bunch of commendatory verses, that is, verses praising Shakespeare's greatness, published at the beginning of it, and then we just start to see the plays. And they're arranged by genre: tragedy, romance, comedy, history, etc. Okay? The people who don't think Shakespeare was really Shakespeare, they take the fact that there's 7 years between these dates as being very, very important. Because, if another major author had died in 1617, usually poets that were around would write some kind of verse celebrating his or her life right around the time they died. We actually see this with not major authors, with really minor authors. And a little book of poems will be published celebrating that person. We don't see anything like that with Shakespeare in 1616. One reason for that could be Shakespeare's not living in London. 1612, he moves home to Stratford. He moves back to his wife because Anne doesn't come with him to London. She stays in Stratford, okay, for all the time that Shakespeare's in London. So, you got a chronology there on 1537. Sorry, Susanna's born in 83. According to your chronology. Turn to 1538 or 9. 1538. And let me give a little bit of background. We finished by discussing Oedipus. Okay? Drama kept going on from ancient Greece through ancient Rome into about the 2nd century, roughly about between 100 and 200 AD. So you pretty much had plays being written, performed, etc., continuously from about 450 BC up to about 200 or so AD. And then they die, roughly. Definitely after 400, nobody's writing plays. Nobody. Not in Rome, not in Constantinople, not anywhere in Europe. Nobody is writing plays. But in the medieval period, beginning around 1200, we start to see the rise again of drama. And interestingly enough, it arises the same way almost that it arose in ancient Greece. It arises in religious services. Okay? In ancient Greece, the first plays were religious services, or were done as part of religious festivals. In the Middle Ages, again around 1100 or so, we start to see what's called, I think you're both mentioned this, we start to see what's called the Quim, if I can remember how to spell this, Quaertis, the Quim Quietus trope, okay? You know, it's Latin. And it's from the Easter service. It's from the part in the Easter church service, in the medieval church, when the Marys, Mary the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and then there's another Mary, when they run to the tomb on Easter Sunday morning, they're going to go anoint the dead body of Jesus. And they get there, and what do they see? The tomb is open, and there's a guy dressed in all white sitting there. And they ask him, "Where have you put our Lord?" And he says, "He's not here, He rose from the dead, as he told you. He has gone on to Galilee. Okay? So, in the church service, you have somebody play the part of an angel, and you have somebody play the part of the three Marys. You have one person. And they ask, where is? He's not here. What have we just seen? Dialogue. We see an action. Okay? That gradually grows. Okay? Until it becomes an actual kind of production. And this is where, picking up on page 1538, that develops until in the later Middle Ages, 1300, 1400, okay, you have different kind of actual plays. And you have three plays mentioned there on 1538. Three kinds of plays, sorry. Mystery plays, miracle plays, and morality plays. They're all religious in orientation. Okay? Mystery plays are plays that are based upon stories from the Bible. A whole bunch of these survive. Okay? For example, there's a play about Noah and the flood. Okay? There are multiple plays about the crucifixion. Okay? There are plays about the fall, these are just mentioned in your book, plays about the fall of Adam and Eve, plays about creation, okay? Plays about Daniel in the lion's den, plays about the three youths in the fiery furnace of Nebuchadnezzar, etc. Okay? Those are mystery plays. They dramatize biblical events. Okay? Then you have miracle plays. Miracle plays are plays based on the lives of saints. Now, the saints might be biblical characters like Abraham and Isaac. Okay? Or they might be biblical characters like Mary Magdalene. Or they might be characters after the Bible, but people who are acknowledged as saints. Saint Jerome, Saint Gregory, Saint Augustine, etc. Okay? The third kind of play is a morality play. Morality plays are entirely, word we've seen before, allegorical. We saw it in its form, allegory. In a morality play, you have symbols or allegories that stand for or only represent one thing. The play that's mentioned, Everyman. Everyman is the main character. Guess what Everyman represents? Everyman, thank you. And he has friends. For example, goods, Goods. That is one of the characters. So, material stuff. Another character is friends. Another character is vice. Vice never represents virtue. Always represents vice. There's another character who comes to take every man at the end of the play, death. Okay? The reason they're allegory is all you need to do really is look at the names and you're told what you're dealing with. All right? So, mystery plays, miracle plays, morality plays. After a while, we start to see these plays, again, evolve more. And by the 15th century, especially the late 15th century, the very early 16th century, the plays have lost some of their religious symbolism or significance, and we start to see new kinds of plays that aren't really religious at all. Okay? By Shakespeare's day, the late 16th century, you do still have some morality plays, for example, being performed, but not many. For the simple reason, they're boring. I mean, you're being beat over the head with an allegorical cudgel. They're trying to ram this idea into you. Okay? But by Shakespeare's day, plays have changed quite a bit. For example, and I think this is going to be on 1540 or so, talking about the kinds of plays that Shakespeare even wrote. You know, one of the common types of play during Shakespeare's early period was a revenge play or a revenge tragedy, okay, which we'll talk about in a moment. Look at page 1539. Now, in the Middle Ages, plays would sometimes be performed on a rolling platform. Think like a flatbed truck. Flatbed wagon, no sides, so that it can be dragged away by oxen or horses. And the merchants who, by the later Middle Ages, are the ones putting on the plays, you know, they would have festival days or feast days or fairs. On these fairs or feast days, essentially the town would shut down so that all the merchants could have a huge sale, like a block party garage sale. Okay, and so people would come from far and wide. They'd come out of the countryside. They'd go into town because there'd be all kinds of fresh food. You'd have people selling their wares, and one of the things that would happen in the town center would be a production of plays. So that we have certain plays, for example, that are named after these fair or feast days. The Corpus Christi plays, for example, are named after Corpus Christi Day, the Body of Christ Day in the English calendar. By Shakespeare's day, people aren't producing these plays on movable trucks. Okay, you have playhouses being built. So when the Globe gets built, it looks, you've got a cutaway image of the Globe. I think it is on 1540 in the book. But it looks essentially like this. It's not actually round. If I remember right, there's 22 sides to the Globe. But it's essentially round, and it looks like this. You have the stage, okay? I don't remember the exact dimensions. It's like 25 feet by 47 feet, something like that. The stage stands right about this tall, about 4 feet tall, okay? And then around the stage, like this, is a gallery. This is 3 levels high, okay? And then this is called, sorry, not the pit, this is called the yard. If someone wanted to go see a Shakespeare play and they were poor or not well off, they'd pay a penny to go stand in the yard. Now, the yard, the ground, wasn't paved. It was mud and sawdust and leftover food, because people would bring their food with them and eat and throw the remains on the ground. They wouldn't get up and leave to use the restroom. They'd go right there. Okay, so that meant you better put on a good play. Because if the yardlings, or the groundlings, sorry, if the groundlings didn't like the play, we have written evidence of this. People talk about going to the play, seeing the groundling, scoop up what's on the ground and throw it on the stage. Okay, you've heard of people, you know, getting egged or thrown with, you know, cantaloupe or something. Well, imagine what this would be like, because this is a mixture of blah, okay? But then you have the gallery. In Shakespeare's day, there was a certain area, I'm pretty sure it was off to this side, and it was the middle gallery that was reserved for the Queen. Okay? The distance from here to here is the length of this classroom and another half. It's not large. It's not the length, the length of a tennis court. Okay? It's about maybe half the court or a little bit more than that. So you don't really have to project your voice all that well. Plays were produced during the day because they didn't have lighting for afternoon or evening other than torches. Okay? But, it'd be hard to keep this well lit. The Globe actually has a big column here and a big column here. And then behind the stage, you have what's called the tiring house, where people would get attired. Okay? And there would be, usually, in the tiring house, 3 sets of doors for actors to come in and out of. Okay? This tiring house, if you look at it from the side, would look like this. This is the side. Doors would be here. This would be the balcony. So that when Romeo sees Juliet at the balcony, Juliet has gone inside and come back out here. If you go to the Globe today, unless it's needed for the play, musicians are up here, okay, playing their stuff. Okay, 1539. You have aside and soliloquy used. An aside is when a character comes out and usually stands towards the edge of the stage and looks at the audience and utters something that isn't meant for anybody else on the stage.
It's like what he's thinking, like when he's talking
to
the person.
Exactly. Okay? It's meant only for the audience to know. Okay? The difference between that and a soliloquy is in a soliloquy, this is the only person on the stage. Okay? Speech delivered while an actor is alone on the stage. Like an aside, it reveals a character's state of mind. But look at the very next sentence. Hamlet's to be or not to be speech is the most famous example of a soliloquy. But it's not. Because Hamlet's not alone on the stage when he delivers that speech. There's another person on the stage. Ophelia is on the stage. And from the stage directions, we know, think of the stage as being like this, okay? All of that. Stage is like this. Hamlet may be here. Ophelia's out here. There is a curtain right here. And there are 2 people behind the curtain. Now, some will say they're not on the stage. They shouldn't, however, go inside the tiring house. We'll talk about this when we get to this scene in Hamlet. They shouldn't go inside the tiring house because they're listening to what Hamlet is saying. Okay? So, if to be or not to be is not a soliloquy, then it doesn't reveal really what Hamlet is thinking. It all becomes part of Hamlet's act. Okay? That's a pretty huge distinction. They say the stage is 25 feet deep, 40 feet wide. Okay, so you see an example of the reconstructed, architectural reconstruction of the Globe on 1540. Go to 1541, where we have Shakespeare's drama, the kind of stuff he's writing and performing. 3 basic categories: histories, comedies, tragedies. The one group they don't mention are those plays that are called the problem plays. Merchant of Venice is one. Measure for Measure is another one. They're called problem plays because it's not clear which genre they fit into. Some people will say Merchant of Venice is a comedy because it kind of ends up well at the end. Same for Measure for Measure. But it doesn't really. I mean, even for Shakespeare's day, a lot of audiences, the end of the Merchant of Venice, where you essentially have a Jew forced to convert to Christianity or die. Problems with that. Even in Shakespeare's day, there were problems with that. Okay? But histories, comedies, tragedies. The histories are English history. Okay? Julius Caesar is not a history play. Julius Caesar is a tragedy. Okay? The plays about Henry IV parts 1 and 2, are history plays. The play about Henry VI, or the plays about Henry VI are history plays. Richard III is a history play. Richard II is a history play. Henry V. All the history plays are about English history. Okay? Shakespeare writes those based upon a couple of different sources. Your text mentions Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. They're primarily, but that's not the only source. Right? The comedies. The comedies are romantic comedies. Today we call them rom-coms. Shakespeare wouldn't have. Okay? They're usually about interrupted love or love that is being obstructed by something. Sometimes it's apparent. Parent, not apparent, easily seen. Other times it's some other problem. For example, Midsummer Night's Dream. There's not a parent involved. Well, take that back. There is at the beginning in the human world. But once you enter the fairy world, no. Okay? So, comedy, as I said the other day, is where the play will start off and there's some problem that threatens to rip apart society, but the problem gets resolved. And by the end of the play, society is restored. Nearly everyone is happy. However, I think in all of Shakespeare's plays, there is always at least one individual who's not entirely pleased with how things end up. And I think that's because Shakespeare's a realist. Shakespeare understands. Even when things work out, they don't always work out for everybody. In order for all of these people to get everything they want, essentially, somebody over here has to lose something. And here's an example. Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, you weren't supposed to read to the end of it for today, but I'm going to give away part of it. Hermia's father is not necessarily happy at the end. But the Duke tells him this is the way it's going to be. Yes, Your Highness. He has to accept it. Okay? Comic relief. Where do you see comic relief in film today? Comic relief isn't an entire funny film. Why do writers include comic relief?
So like
to release tension if it's overtly serious, yeah. Okay. You can't go on with something with suspense, building. You have to have that little letdown, and then you kind of build it up again. Okay? Notice a humorous scene or incident that alleviates tension in an otherwise serious work. Then your text goes on and mentions romantic comedies. Mentions specifically Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It. Okay? 3 of the greatest romantic comedies, by the way. And then satire. What does satire do? Your book says it casts a critical eye on vices and follies by holding them up to ridicule. How? To point out an absurdity. Okay. Satire is not mean. Okay? Satire is not designed to destroy. Satire is designed to reform. Satire is designed to correct. So, telling somebody who's grossly overweight, you are a big fat slob, that's not satire.
That's insulting.
That's insulting. Sometimes what happens, for example, on Saturday Night Live or the comedy show, Comedy Central, isn't satire. It's just mean. Okay? Satire always points out a characteristic, a trait that is wrong or bad that needs to be corrected. It essentially does this. Here's a mirror. Look at yourself. Okay? In one sense, you can almost even say the black veil is satiric in that it kind of says, look at yourself. Okay? Page 1543. Two different kinds of comedy are mentioned. High comedy and low comedy. High comedy, verbal wit, where you have people talking and what they're saying is humorous or funny. Okay? Versus low comedy. High comedy, I'll give you a couple examples. When these guys were in their prime, George Carlin, American comedian, Bill Cosby, Jonathan Winters, Chris Rock, Richard Pryor, okay? Eddie Murphy. Low comedy, The Three Stooges. Chevy Chase on Saturday Night Live, when he would always trip. Okay? What we often call today slapstick, where a slap is involved, a punch. Okay? A lot of the comedy you see in cartoons, like Saturday morning cartoons. You know, somebody gets, what happens with Wile E. Coyote? He gets an anvil dropped on his head. Okay? You're not going to survive that. It's meant humorously. It's a sight gag. All right? Farce, a form of comedy or humor based on exaggerated, improbable incongruities. For example, when Malvolio is tricked into wearing bizarre clothing and behaving like a fool to win Olivia. Malvolio is somebody who doesn't like anybody except for Olivia. And so he'll do anything to try to win her hand. Here's an example of farce. If you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, okay, there's the scene when they're trying to escape the prison and Rocket says, I need that guy's leg. Okay? And so Chris Pratt's character, Star-Lord, goes and takes the guy's leg. He goes, no, I didn't really need that. It's just kids. That's farce. Okay? Tragedy, however, does not promise peace and contentment. As we've already talked about with tragedy related to Greek drama. Shakespeare's protagonists are exceptional human beings whose stature makes their misfortune all the more dramatic. Othello, Macbeth, King Lear, Hamlet, okay, Julius Caesar. Notice it's not the average poor slob who rises and falls. We don't want to see that. Why? Because we want to see the average poor slob rise and succeed. Okay? It's the high and mighty. Why do the high and mighty always fall in tragedy? I think there's an element of human nature that, because most of us aren't the high and mighty, we want to see the high and mighty get taken down a notch. To be not so high and not so mighty, not so full of themselves. Okay? Page 1544, talking about Othello and Macbeth. Macbeth is not simply a murderer. Okay? He is a murderer, but that's not all. There are things to be admired in the character of Macbeth. There are things to be admired in the character of Othello. It's when they go over that we no longer admire them. There's a lot to be admired in Hamlet. His inaction, however, is not something Shakespeare holds up to be admired. Okay? A note on reading Shakespeare. The language is difficult. Okay? It's not our everyday language. And some of it wasn't Shakespeare's everyday language. Okay? Some of the dialogue that Shakespeare includes, and some of the what he does in the plays, it's deliberately a little bit archaic. Some of it. Okay? What else? There are some suggestions for enhancing your understanding and pleasure in reading the plays. Try to keep track of the characters. Now, reading Shakespeare isn't like reading Tolkien, because Shakespeare doesn't have several hundred names to keep track of. There's usually somewhere between 15 and 20. And there are major characters and there are minor characters. Okay? Remember that poetic language deserves to be read slowly and carefully. And really, you want to really get it? Read it aloud. It's meant for the ear. It's not meant for the eye. Okay? You will hear some of the humor that your eye and brain won't catch. Pay attention to annotations, that is the glosses, things like that. As you read a scene, try to imagine for yourself how it would appear on the stage. And I think this is really important. Who would you cast for these characters? Hermia is supposed to be somewhat short, dark hair, not necessarily black, but kind of a darker complexion. Okay? Helena is supposed to be tall and willowy, blonde, slender. Okay? Kate Blanchett would make a fantastic Helena. She's a little too old now, but she'd make a fantastic Helena. Puck should be kind of short, gymnastic-y, for lack of a better word, nimble, lithe, acrobatic, because he does things on the stage that others don't. Oberon, king of the fairies, ought to be commanding, so that when he enters the scene, you know it's the king of the fairies. Similarly, Titania, queen of the fairies, when she enters the scene, your eyes ought to be drawn to her. And when she and Oberon are going back and forth, it ought to be like fireworks. She is completely holding her own with him. She's not a wallflower, in other words. She's not a shrinking violet. Okay? She needs to have enough stage presence. It doesn't matter what you throw at her. She's going to stand on her own 2 feet and such. Okay? Then, after you read it, watch a production. Get it in your mind first. Direct it, shoot it in your mind first. Get your imagination in gear so that you do all the scenery up here first. Then watch a production. Why in that order? If you watch one first, it'll be harder to create your own, because you will inevitably be brought back to some of those images you've already seen. Okay? So, Midsummer Night's Dream. To say it's one of Shakespeare's most popular plays is an understatement. You can go to London every summer and probably see, just in London, 10 or 15 different productions of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Some of them will be, world-renowned, the Globe, or the National Theater or the Barbican or something like that. Some of them will be little tiny rinky-dink productions, okay? But there will be 10 or 15 at least productions of A Midsummer Night's Dream going on throughout the summer in London. Some will be actually in theaters. Others will be in parks. Probably, I've seen it, I don't know, half dozen times probably at the Globe. One of the best productions I've ever seen is in a churchyard off Covent Garden. Okay, I don't remember what the place was called, but they did this very interesting production because you had this big old 18th century church here, and then it's got this large like garden in the back. And we arrived, and a bunch of other people, a lot of other people were there, and they had a little area set up over here, and then they had a little area set up over here. And people are, kind of milling around. It seems like there was one other place. Yeah, there was, right here in front of the church. It's actually the back of the church. People are milling around, and all of a sudden this guy starts kind of shouting fairly loudly from over here. The play had begun. They didn't ring a bell. They didn't catch anybody's attention. And so this mass of people, 100, 200 people who had bought their tickets, they're like 12, 15 pounds per ticket, all start moving over in this direction. And people are just sitting on the ground and standing next to trees over here. And there's, part of the play going on. I think it's the first scene, first act. It finishes, and you see a couple of the actors kind of come over to this area. And so people kind of slowly start making the way. And then this act begins, and people start thronging to get over here. Okay? That act ends. It comes over here to the porch in front of the church. So every act, you had to get up and move. You had to move with the actors. And then the last two acts were inside the church, okay? Which was kind of weird. Especially with the people who were putting this on. Let's just say they were kind of avant-garde actors. They were stretching the boundaries, as it were. The guy who played, as an example, the guy who played Oberon, real hunky guy. I mean, real hot and everything. My son, at the time, and when was this? My son at the time this must have been 2011. So 4 or 5 years ago. He was 15 or 16, I can't remember which. This was before he started lifting weights and got all ripped and everything. He's kind of overweight and nerdy looking. But he's sitting there, and this guy comes up and sits on his lap. And my son's like, he didn't know what to do. Because Oberon is part of the play. Was kind of coming onto him. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? This is just... And my son, his face is just turning multiple shades of beet red. Okay? And then the guy finally gets up and goes off the rest of the play. And we're like, well, Nathaniel, what'd you think? He had no words for it. But afterwards, they were like, and they'd seen 2 or 3 other productions of Midsummer Night's Dream. That was the greatest production because it did one thing every play ought to do. It brought the audience into the play. Okay? That is, it made the audience really feel like this thing is happening. Just another quick aside. One of the first times my wife and I saw it at the Globe, we were groundlings. We were standing in the yard. My wife's only about 5'1". On a good day, she's 5'1 and a half. She's standing really tall. So she's at and we got, if the stage was like this, we got there early enough. We were dead center on the stage, which usually means you got to get there about 45 minutes early. Once they open the gates, you rush, you elbow people out of your way, So we're standing right here, and, I'm like this, and she's kind of like this. And the play starts and everything, This is Midsummer Night's Dream. And the guy who's playing Oberon in Duke Theseus, because they did double duty, is a Scottish actor named Paul Higgins. Think Gerard Butler when he was about 30, 35. I mean, this guy was just drop dead gorgeous. And I'm saying that as an extreme heterosexual male. I mean, men would want to have this guy's children, okay? And he had the greatest Scottish accent. Now, I love Scots accents. I'm part Scots. And so he's playing his part, and there's a scene in the play. I think we do it today. There's a scene in the play where Oberon has Titania befuddled, let's say, with the potion, so that she wakes up and she falls in love with Bottom, who has the ass's head on his head. Okay? And Oberon comes out, and he says, I wonder what has happened. Okay? When Paul Higgins does this, he comes out to the front of the stage, and he sees me, and he sees my wife, and he does this. And he talks directly to my wife. And he says, I wonder if Titania be awake. And my wife says, no. And I'm like, Karen, shut the hell up. You know, there's roughly 3,000 people looking right down at us. So, I mean, his face is like this far away from hers. And he asks, I wonder if Titania be awake. And she says, no. And he goes, no? She goes, no. Well, what then? And I don't think my wife replied, but he winks at her, and then he gets up. And then at the end of the play, when they come out and take their bows, he looks right at her and does this. Okay? Doing what? Bringing the audience directly into the play. Not just that one person, but then everyone. We've seen other plays where there's supposed to be a sound from the heavens, a rumble. And a big old wide-body jet is just flying into Heathrow at that moment. Okay, Heathrow's 30 miles outside of London. But the flight path goes directly over the globe. And they're only flying about 1,000 feet off the ground at that point. Okay? And so you hear this, you know, like a jet coming through. And the actors will look up because it doesn't matter if they're declaiming at the top of their lungs. Nobody's going to hear them. So they'll wait for that moment to pause or to pass. All right, Midsummer Night's Dream. As I said the other day, it's set primarily in Athens. Okay? Part of it is set in a wood outside Athens. General plot. You have two people who want to get married. Who are they?
Theseus and Hippolyta.
Okay, Theseus and Hippolyta are getting married at the beginning. I mean, that's already set. Okay? Theseus, who's the Duke of Athens, and Hippolyta, who is the Queen of the Amazons. Okay? But their nuptials are already set. This is already set into motion. Hermia wants to marry Lysander. Okay? But who else wants to marry Hermia? Demetrius. But then there's another woman named Helena. She wants to marry Demetrius. Demetrius wants to marry Hermia. And Lysander wants to marry Hermia. Hey, put on the play today. It doesn't matter. Have a polyamorous marriage. You know, just the more the merrier. No, not in Shakespeare's day. Okay? Behind all of this is Hermia's father, Aegeus. Okay. Who does Aegeus want Hermia to marry? Demetrius. So he kind of favors him. And then you go off into the fairy realm, and you have Oberon, who is married to Titania. Okay? So look how it opens. Now, fair Hippolyta, we are doing 1 through 3 today, right? Through 1602. Yeah. Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. What's Theseus saying? Yeah, it's taking too long. 4 days. Man, I have to wait that long. Okay? And she says 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. And then the moon, like to a silver bow, new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnities. So, Theseus directs Philostrate, or Philostrate, if you want, okay, to go prepare the revels. Go prepare the festivities for our wedding. Okay? So Aegeus comes in with his daughter, and Lysander, and Demetrius. And notice, Aegeus says that he's full of vexation and complaint. Against my child, my daughter Hermia. Stand forth, Demetrius. So Demetrius comes forth. And he says, this man hath my consent to marry her. Stand forth, Lysander, and this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. How has he bewitched the bosom of his child? He hath given her rhymes. He wrote poems for her. And interchanged love tokens with my child. And a bunch of other stuff. Okay? So, Aegeus is essentially asking Theseus for the ancient privilege of Athens, which is, she's mine to do with as I please. She marries whom I want her to marry, or the old law will be fulfilled. Off with her head. I mean, he's pretty serious about this. So, Theseus says, what say you, Hermia? Be advised, fair maid, to you your father should be as a god. One that composed your beauties, yea, one to whom you are but as a form in wax, by him imprinted. In feminist, man, they just rip apart, they hate that line, because it means, according to them, she's nothing but what her father makes of her. It's not what it means, however. Okay? So, Demetrius is worthy. Come on, Hermia, what do you say? And she says, well, so is Lysander. Theseus, notice, he doesn't disagree. Yeah, you're right. He is. But he lacks something. Your father's voice. Meaning, your father's consent. So what does Hermia say? Okay, this is a little element, I think, of high comedy. I would my father look but with my eyes. If my father looked at Lysander the way I do, then he would also favor Lysander. But think about that also. It's a little weird, because if her father looked at Lysander the way she looked at Lysander, he'd want to marry Lysander. Okay? And let me just remind you, who's playing the part of Hermia? A boy. All women's roles were played by boys. Women weren't allowed on the stage. Okay? So all women's roles are played by boys. Sometimes men, but usually boys because of the high voice. So, Theseus, rather your eyes must with his judgment look. Hermia, I do entreat your grace to pardon me. I know not by what power I'm made bold. In other words, she's saying, forgive me, Lord, but I'm going to let go with both barrels here. So what does she say? Tell me the worst that can happen to me. if I don't agree to marry Demetrius? And he's, okay, either die the death, die, or abjure forever the society of men. Either die or go live in a nunnery, a convent. So, here's your choice. If you can endure the livery of a nun, and what he means by that is if you can live the rest of your life and never have sex, if you can still those urges, that's what you can do. Or marry him or die. Okay? She says, okay, I'm going to grow old then, unmarried, virginal, before I, how does she put it? Yield up my virgin patent. That is, before she yields up her virginity to Demetrius. Theseus, okay, you don't have to give me a decision now. Let's, by the next new moon, tell me. Well, when is the next new moon? 4 days. What else is happening on that day? Yeah, is it really wise to say we'll make the decision on my wedding day? Wouldn't this kind of, put a black spot maybe on the wedding? Demetrius says, relent, sweet Hermia. Lysander, yield. You have her father's love, Demetrius. Let me have Hermia's. Now that is high comedy. If Jesus loves you, let Hermia love me. You two go off in the woods and do what you want to do, and we'll go off and... Scornful Lysander, Aegeus gets the joke. True, he hath my love, and what is mine, my love shall render him, and she is mine, and all my right of her. And so, Lysander, I am as well derived as he. That is, I come from as good a family as he does. As well possessed, my love is more than his, my fortune's way is fairly ranked. That is, the conduct of my life, everything about us so far is equal, except for my love. And, which is more than all these boasts can be, I am beloved of beauteous Hermia. That is, but she loves me. And, what else does he throw out? What mark does he ascribe to Demetrius? What's he done to Helena? He made love to Nadar's daughter, Helena, and won her soul. It doesn't mean he had sex with her. It means he wooed her. He spoke nice things to her. He bought her flowers. He took her out. He gave her poems, etc. And did what? He won her heart. Helena is in love with him now. Theseus, yeah, I've heard about that. Ooh, if the Duke hears about it, it's got to be pretty rampant. And with Demetrius thought to have spoke thereof. But being overfull of self-affairs, that is, I've got my wedding to plan, I've got, Gilder to invade, my wife to kill. My mind did lose it. That is, he says, I forgot about it. So, he and Demetrius and Aegeus leave. So who's left on the stage? Lysander and Hermia. What happens? Okay, complication. Okay, they're going to complicate the stuff. So they talk to each other. And what does Lysander say? Around line 155, 166. He says, let's go off to the wood where my aunt lives, where Athenian law cannot reach us. And we'll marry there. And she says, I'll meet you in the wood. Okay? Helena enters. And Hermia and Helena talk back and forth. And Lysander. And they tell Helena, we're going to meet in the wood and we're going to go get married. Okay. Hermia leaves. Lysander leaves. And so Helena is alone on the stage. She gets the first soliloquy. And what does she say? Okay, let's do this. Here's Athens. Here's the wood. Hermia and Lysander are going to run off to the wood. What does Helena say? Ooh, me too. Helena says she will go there also. And what will she do? Okay. She says she's going to suggest it to Demetrius. So we get scene 2, Athens. And we're introduced to a group of characters variously called the rude mechanicals, okay, or the clowns sometimes. Rude mechanicals means these are guys common base lineage who work with their hands for a living. Okay? Look at the kind of people we have. Quince the carpenter, Snug the joiner, Bottom the weaver, Flute the bellows mender, Snout the tinker, and Starveling the tailor. They're all craftsmen. Okay? And they've heard Philostrates' charge to get people to put on plays and stuff. And so they're going to put on a play for the wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta. And what's the play called? Page 1554 at the top, line 10 or so. The most lamentable comedy and most cruel death of Pyramus and Thisbe. Can you have a comedy that's lamentable? No. Okay? So, pretty much all of this is meant as humor. These are guys using words they don't know what they mean. Okay? So what do we see? We have Peter Quince, who's kind of the director. He's handing out parts. And as he describes the parts, what does Bottom do?
He says he can play them all.
Yeah, he wants to play them all. He's going to put on a one-man play. People have done, by the way, one-man plays, for example, of A Midsummer Night's Dream. One person does all the parts. Okay? It's pretty amazing if you actually watch them. There's one of Kevin Kline doing Hamlet, which is mind-blowing. Okay? So we get all this stuff. Bottom's, showing how he can do all the parts, etc. And Peter Quince finally says, no, you're going to be Pyramus, etc. Okay? Go to Act 2. We're now in a wood near Athens. Athenian law no longer holds sway. And what else? We're no longer in the realm of humans. Because look at the very first person who enters. Enter a fairy at one door, and Robin Goodfellow, Puck, at another. So, if we still had the tiring house here, things look like this. Here's a door, here's a door, here's a door. They come out like that. And Puck, come out, spirit, whither wandereth you? Where are you going? And the fairy said, da, 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 over hill, over dale, doing all this stuff. And the spirit says, or the fairy says, the queen is coming here tonight. Puck, she better be careful because the king is going to hold court here. And they're not getting along so well. And the fairy says, excuse me if I'm wrong, but aren't you Puck? Robin Goodfellow? Those who call you hobgoblin? Okay. The very word Puck, it's not necessarily English. You see this quote-unquote spirit, this fairy, in English mythology, in Irish and Scottish, Celtic mythology, in Indian, not like Native American, but in this India, Pakistani, Indian, Bengali, it's in Russian. This is an old idea. Okay? It's essentially a trickster. Someone who likes to play practical jokes. You walk into a room, You set your keys down, you go do something, you come back, and they're gone. It's because of Puck, according to this kind of way of thinking. So, Puck says, yeah, that's me. And we see Oberon and Titania come in. Each with their train of followers. I mean, this is kind of meant to be somewhat majestic. Ill met by moonlight, proud Titania. In other words, I wasn't ready to meet you. What, jealous Oberon? Fairy, skip hence. I have forsworn his bed and a company. Notice Shakespeare puts bed first. Tells you there is a huge rupture in this relationship. They're married. Okay? They're not sleeping together anymore. There's a problem here. Tarry, rash wanton, am not I thy lord? You know, trying to get the upper hand. Then I must be thy lady. But I know when thou hast stolen away from fairyland and in the shape of corn, sat all day playing on the pipes of corn, and versing love to amorous Phillida. She's talking about this notion from medieval and Renaissance kind of mythology that the king of the fairies will leave the realm of the fairies and go, quote unquote, make love to farm girls who are doing their duties, taking care of the farm. Okay? So notice, Oberon calls her wanton. Your gloss, it's line about 63 or so, says headstrong creature. It's not only what it means, it also means loose woman. Okay? And what does she say? Well, then I must be thy lady. But she knows what? Well, if I'm your lady, why is it you're leaving fairyland and going off and playing around with Phillida? Okay? Why art thou here? Come from the farthest step of India, etc. Oh, I know why you're here. Because that bouncing Amazon is getting married. She's saying, you're only here because Hippolyta's here. She's essentially saying, your mistress is here. Okay? Oberon, how canst thou thus for shame, Titania, glance at my credit with Hippolyta, knowing I know thy love to Theseus? Okay, they're not each asserting that the other is physically in love with these humans. What they are each asserting, though, is that the other has shown favors, has given blessings, let's say, to those respective humans. And he says, come on, I know you've helped Theseus. These are but the forgeries of jealousy. In other words, this isn't why you're really angry at me. No, I know why you're angry with me. What is she keeping from Oberon? Louder? Little Indian boy, not a prince, whose mother, we're told, was a votary of hers, that is, a follower of Titania's. Oberon wants the little boy for what? No. To serve him. To serve him. She's like, no, I'm not going to give him to you. Okay? So, what do we see? The supernatural world, or the fairy world, is disjointed. In every Shakespeare play, if there's a problem in the supernatural world, guess what? There's going to be a problem here. Okay? Because there is this thought pattern in their day that consequences in one realm, let's say, ripple out and affect everything. And the supernatural, use an economic term, trickles down. Everything that happens up here affects what happens down here. So, we see a romantic relationship, a love relationship that is what? Disturbed. So what can we expect to happen in the human realm? Exact same thing. Okay? So, Oberon and Titania go back and forth. Oberon wants to know how long you're planning on staying here. She says, until after the wedding day. Oberon says, give me the boy, and I'll go with thee. Not for thy fairy kingdom. Fairies away, and they leave. And what does Oberon do? All right, I'll get you. And he tells Puck about the love and idleness flower, the pansy. He says, remember that flower? Puck says, yeah. He says, go find it for me, because I'm going to put the juice of that flower on her eyelids so that when she wakes up, she's going to fall in love with some horrible monstrous thing, panther or cougar or bear, etc. And Puck says, I'll put a girdle around the earth in 40 minutes. He'll circumnavigate the globe in 40 minutes. Gives you an idea of how fast Puck can move. Okay? So, the fairies are there, and what happens? Or Oberon is there, and Demetrius and Helena come in. And Demetrius is trying to get across gently at first. What? I don't love you. And how's Helena acting? Crazy. Okay? You draw me, you hard-hearted adamant. I am true as steel, etc. She says, I have no power. I shall have no power to follow you. Do I entice you? Do I speak you fair? Do not I, in plainest truth, say I do not love you? And she says, and for that, I love you the more. I am your spaniel. She's saying, I'm your dog. I'm like a pet. I'm going to follow you to the ends of the earth. Demetrius, I'm sick when I look on you. And I'm sick when I don't look on you. Some people say she's just sick. Right? He says, you do impeach your modesty too much. Because look, you're a beautiful young lady. I'm a handsome, strong man. We're alone. We're in the forest. No one can hear your screams. I mean, that's what he's implying. She says, oh, but your virtue, line 220, is my privilege. She says, I'm not afraid to be in the woods with you. Demetrius, I'll run from thee and hide me in the brakes, that is, and you'll be all alone. And she says, run when you will. I'll run after you. So Demetrius leaves. And Oberon has observed all this. And notice what he wants to do. He wants to remedy the situation. Fare thee well, nymph, ere he do leave this grove, thou shalt fly him, and he shall seek thy love. He's going to turn the tables. Demetrius will want you, and you'll reject him. So, Puck comes back in, gives the flower to Oberon, and Oberon says, there's an Athenian lady in this wood. She's in love with a disdainful youth. Anoint his eyes, but do it when the next thing he espies may be the lady. You'll know the man by his Athenian garb. Pretty clear. Okay. So they leave. Titania comes back in with her fairies. And her fairies come in. They sing to her. She falls asleep. Oberon comes in. He finds her asleep. He puts the love and idleness juice on her eyes and says, what thou seest, line 35 or so in scene 2, what thou seest when thou dost wake, do it for thy true love take. Love and languish for his sake, be it ounce or cat or bear, pard or boar with bristled hair. In thy eye that shall appear, when thou wakest it is thy dear. Wake when some vile thing is near. Okay? Notice, by the way, Oberon speaks in rhyme. Okay? So, Oberon leaves. Lysander and Hermia now come in. They talk back and forth. They're going to go to sleep. Hermia's like, you over there. I know, I trust you, but over there, because I'm a good girl. And Puck comes in. And what does he see? A youth in Athenian garb. How many of those can there be? He puts the juice on his eyes. And as soon as he does, Helena and Demetrius come running in. Lysander wakes up. And now what happens? He no longer loves Hermia. Now he loves Helena. And Lysander says, after he first kind of proclaims his love for her, content with Hermia? No, I do repent the tedious minutes I with her have spent. Not Hermia, but Helena I love. Okay, so Helena still loves Demetrius. Demetrius still loves Hermia. But now Lysander loves Helena. Poor girl, her brain's just fried. And then Hermia awakes after Lysander and Helena and Demetrius leave. And she's like, I had a weird dream. I dreamed that Demetrius no longer loved me. And we get Act 3. Notice, we're still in the wood. So Act 2 is all in the wood, and Act 3 is all in the wood. And we're back with Bottom and the rude mechanicals. Okay? They're putting on their play. They're practicing it. And what happens? Bottom exits for a moment, and this is page 1570, about line 85. No, it's actually before that. It must be about line 82 or so. And Puck transforms his head into the head of an ass. Big long ears, long snout, and okay? Bottom comes back in. He's gone off into the woods for a moment. He comes back into the clearing. And Bottom says, if I were fair, Thisbe, I were only thine. And Quint, so monstrous, so strange. Not because of the acting, not because of the script, but because he sees Bottom transformed. And Bottom's like, why is everybody running from me? Oh, Bottom, thou art changed, Snout says. What do you see? Bottom replies. You see an ass head of your own. Do you? Notice nobody said you have the head of an ass. Okay. Peter Quince comes in, tells Bottom he's translated. He means transformed. Okay. So, all the mechanicals leave except for Bottom. And because he's all alone now and he's in the wood, he's a little frightened, so he starts to sing to calm himself. And Titania awakes. She's been asleep the whole time. The way this is usually performed is you see the fairies, or Titania in this case, asleep somewhere, okay? But the humans can't see her because she's a supernatural being. The production we saw with Paul Higgins is really cool because for costumes, they had on pajamas. I mean, it looked like prison jumpsuits almost. They were blue and white striped pajamas. But they had woven into the pajamas like Christmas tree lights. Small ones. So that when they were fairies, they had a little thing in their hand. They press the button, the light comes on. Because all the actors did double duty as one of the fairies. So that when Theseus speaks, no lights. When Oberon speaks, he's all lit up. Kind of glows almost. So Bottom starts to sing, and he can't sing. He can't sing worth beans. The ousel cock so black of hue, with orange tawny bill, what angel wakes me from my flowery bed? I pray thee, gentle mortal, sing again. Mine ear is much enamored of thy note. Tells you not everything's right with Titania. So is mine eye enthralled to thy shape, and thy fair virtue's force perforce doth move me on the first view to say, to swear, I love thee. Okay. Titania needs to be drop dead gorgeous. I mean, swimsuit, Sports Illustrated model, gorgeous. Bottom is not, even without the ass's head. Bottom is not necessarily handsome. But the worst production I ever saw was the Murfreesboro Little Theater, when my daughter was like 10 years old and played one of the fairies. The guy they got to play Bottom, the guy who volunteered to play Bottom, was, to put it mildly, obscenely, grotesquely obese. He wouldn't fit in one of these chairs. I mean, he was like on either side obese. I'm not kidding, he was probably pushing 500 pounds. And he was about this tall.
Oh.
And the young lady who was playing Titania, pretty close to drop dead gorgeous. And the costume for her was essentially a bikini with some leaves on it, strategically placed, okay? And so you've got this obscenely grotesque, obese guy with this little live woman, sitting in his lap, almost being swallowed in his fat. I mean, yeah, it is. So, Bottom, methinks, mistress, you should have little reason for that. Little reason for what? Yeah, for loving him, for thinking him fair. And yet, to say the truth, reason and love keep little company together nowadays. And that's one of those little nuggets that I think Shakespeare zings in because it's a little element of truth. Reason and love keep little company together nowadays. The more the pity that some honest neighbors will not make them friends. It's almost like Shakespeare saying, reason and love ought to be melded together. Love should make sense in that sense. Titania, thou art wise as thou art beautiful. Okay, well, he sure as hell ain't beautiful. So what's she saying about his wisdom?
He's got a beautiful mind, I guess.
Yeah.
He's not beautiful anywhere.
He's not beautiful anywhere. I think Titania is disagreeing with the sentiment that reason and love should get along. What's happened between Titania and Oberon? Their love is separated on the basis of what? It's irrationality. Okay? Jealousy is never reasonable, in other words. So, they talk back and forth. She makes her fairies serve Bottom's pleasures, getting him food and all this kind of stuff. And it seemed too, when Paul Higgins knelt down to my wife, I wonder if Titania be awake. She took that as a question for her. No. Well, what was it that came next in her eye? In fact, I do remember my wife. She said, an ass. And he was, no! Yes. Which she must dote on in extremity. And in comes Puck. And Puck comes in and tells Oberon what's happened. And Oberon, yes, this falls out better than I could devise. But hast thou yet latched the Athenian's eyes? Notice, he is as concerned about Lysander getting what he deserves as he is about Titania getting what she deserves. Puck, yep. Go. Oberon says, here's the Athenian youth now. Puck, that's the woman, but that's not the man. And so Demetrius comes in, and he's chasing after Hermia. She says, I don't want anything to do with you. And they go back and forth. Demetrius lies down and falls asleep, and Oberon turns to Puck. See, in the productions I've seen, while Demetrius and Hermia are having this little discussion, Puck's just kind of back there like this. He's laughing and smiling because he's on the stage the whole time. And he's, like this. Meanwhile, Oberon is standing there just pissed. I mean, he is shooting daggers what hast thou done? Thou hast mistaken quite and laid the love juice on some true love sight. Of thy misprision, that is, misprecision, must perforce ensue some true love turned, and not a false turn true. Puck, so what? Then fate overrules that one man holding troth, that is, being faithful, a million fail, confounding oath on oath. What has Puck just said? Because that is a profound statement. Where a million men cheat, one remains true. Okay, is that true? Is it 1 in a million men that will be faithful? Or humans that will be faithful? No. But Puck's saying, doesn't really matter. This is how all humans are. Oberon, go. Find Helena of Athens. She's fancy sick, that is fantasy, sick from her imagination, and pale of cheer with sighs of love. Bring her here. I'll charm his eyes against she do appear, that is, I'll put the love and idleness potion on his eyes, so that when Demetrius wakes up, he will see Helena and love her as he ought to. So, Oberon puts it in Demetrius' eyes, says the little words, Puck comes back, and he says, here comes Helena. And the youth mistook by me, pleading for a lover's fee, shall we their fond pageant see? Fond, foolish, silly, pageant, this little play that they're kind of putting on. Puck's going, can we just watch this for a while? Because this is really good. Okay? Because Lysander comes in, fawning after Helena now. And Helena's like, stop! You do advance your cunning more and more, line 128. When truth kills truth, O devilish holy fray, these vows are Hermia's. In other words, you owe these vows to Hermia. Why are you doing this, Hermia? Right? Demetrius wakes up now. And he's no longer in love with Hermia. Now Demetrius loves Helena. What do you think Helena should think at this point? Thank God, finally. But there's a little problem. Because now Lysander still loves her too. And what does she think? Line 162 or so. Line 145. O spite, O hell, I see you all are bent to set against me for your merriment. She thinks this is a cruel, practical joke on their parts. Notice that at least on Helena's perspective at this point, what could the play become? It could easily become a tragedy. Because if she were Juliet, she'd go kill herself. Okay? In fact, she says, but you must join in souls to mock me too. If you were men, as men you are in show, you would not use a gentle lady so. So Lysander, Demetrius, come on, get out of here. You love Hermia. I heard you. Just yesterday, say so. Demetrius, no, you take Hermia. I don't want her. I will none. Okay? So Hermia comes in. And she asked Lysander, Lysander, why did you leave me? And Lysander says, why should he stay, whom love doth press to go? That is, love took me up and made me leave. Well, what love could press Lysander from my side? Lysander's love, that would not let him by. That is, that would not let him wait. Helena! And Hermia, her mind's about to explode. What? And then she looks at Helena. And Helena's like, she's in on it too. She is one of this confederacy. Now I perceive they have conjoined all three to fashion this false sport. And Hermes like, what? I don't understand. You scorn me. You haven't set, Helena says, top of page 1578, you haven't set Lysander against me as in scorn? I don't know what you mean. Aye. Persever counterfeit sad looks. Make mouths open, upon me when I turn my back. Wink each at other. She's saying, I know how it goes. I turn my back and you two, you look at each other and go, oh, this is going to be good. We're going to play a good one on her. Okay? And Helena, Hermia, Demetrius, they all start going back and forth. Hermia starts to understand, and Hermia, hold on, let me find the line. Hermia grabs onto Lysander. Demetrius, Lysander says, away, you Ethiop, meaning she's dark. And Lysander, hang off, thou cat, because, she's holding on to him. He's trying to shake her loose. And she says, what makes this change? Why? And he calls her tawny, tartar, etc. And she turns on Helena, line 283 or so. After Lysander spells it out clearly, I do hate thee and love Helena. Oh, me, you juggler, you canker blossom, you thief of love. What, have you come by night and stolen my heart's love from him? Helena's like, what the? No. And what does Helena do? Fie, you counterfeit, you puppet. Wrong word to use to a short woman. Especially a short woman who is very self-conscious about her height. Hermia. Puppet. That way goes the game. Now I perceive she hath made compare between our statures. She hath urged her height, and with her personage, her tall personage, her height. Forsooth, she hath prevailed with him. And are you grown so high in his esteem, because I am so dwarfish and so low? How low am I, thou painted maypole? Why is she a painted maypole? Because she has cosmetics on, and because the men are kind of revolving around her, the idea of tying the ribbon around the maypole. Speak, how low am I? I am not yet so low, but that my nails can reach unto thine eyes. And she's like, just launches at her. And in a couple of productions I've seen, the one with Paul Higgins, Hermia was small enough, she jumps, and Helena catches her and holds her. And she's sitting there, and Helena's like, I pray you, though you mock me, gentlemen, let her not hurt me. I was never cursed, etc. Because she is, and she does it again, something lower than myself. Lower? Again? Helena's like, Hermia, we were ever best friends. What's going on? Okay. Meanwhile, what are the fairies doing? Puck is standing in the back, laughing his head off. And Oberon is just kind of standing reserved. And you can almost see the steam building. Because what is Oberon ultimately concerned about? Right love. Proper love. Love restored. Okay? So this goes on back and forth between Lysander, Demetrius, Helena, and Hermia. They all leave, and Puck and Oberon come forth. Oberon, this is thy negligence. Still thou mistakest, or else commits thy knaveries willfully. Still means always, constantly, continuously. He's saying, ever the prankster, Puck? Puck, believe me, King of Shadows, I mistook. Now, Puck at this point needs to be fairly obsequious. That is, he's sucking up. He's afraid of Oberon. Okay? Did you not tell me I should know the man by the Athenian garments? Athenian garments. And so far blameless proves my enterprise, that I have anointed an Athenian's eyes, and so far am I glad it so did sort. Is this their jangling? Notice, they're jangling. It's not a pretty sound. Okay? I did what? I esteem a sport. This is a spectator thing. Something fun to watch. Oberon. These lovers seek a place to fight. That is, Demetrius and Lysander will kill each other. So, overcast the night. That is, make night come early, bring a fog, and put them to sleep so that they are how? So that Hermia is alongside Lysander, and Helena is alongside Demetrius. And do what? Put the love potion in their eyes so that they love the right people. Okay? And Puck says, I will, and I'll hurry because it's getting ready for the sun to come up. So Puck runs around and he throws his voice, makes himself sound like Demetrius and Lysander so that they follow. And he gets them all to fall asleep. Notice, where they don't see each other, they're in the same spot. It's like Lysander's here, Hermia's here, Demetrius is here, and Helena's here. They're 15 feet away at most. Okay? And Puck finishes, after they're all asleep, he puts the juice in their eyes and says, bottom of 1583, on the ground sleep sound. I'll apply to your eye, gentle lover, remedy. When thou wakest, thou takest true delight in the sight of thy former lady's eye. And the country proverb known that every man should take his own, in your waking shall be shown. Jack shall have Jill, naught shall go ill. The man shall have his mare again, and all shall be well. When you wake up, everything will be resolved. Okay? When they wake up. So when they wake up, what will all this have been? A dream. Okay? We'll stop there and do the quiz. Quiz is only over the first 3 acts.